Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. Every week, we bring you stories of people who are making a difference in the lives of others, locally, globally, and digitally. We are part of Rotary International, 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors in 36,000 plus clubs around the world. And the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley is one of them. We are an online and asynchronous Rotary Club. And are very proud of our ability to bring new seats to the Rotary table for those who might find their work schedules challenging for attending a traditional club. Traditional clubs are great, but it's just not for everybody. So there you go. Today, we are talking with Tim Shields. Tim Shields has spent over 50 years as a field biologist and is the one person I know who uses the phrase weaponized techno-tortoise. Hope I got that right. So you probably have already read his bio. If not, feel free to pause the video, and on our webpage on siliconvalleyrotary.com, which you can also find at rotary.cool, you can just scroll up a bit and see that bio. If you are on a YouTube page with this, then you can pause and scroll down and see that same intro. With that, though, I'd like to hand it over to our speaker. Tim, it is a pleasure to have you joining us. Welcome to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley.
Thanks, and I really appreciate the invitation to talk to you guys about my business, which is called Hardshell Labs. And what I want to talk about is emerging tech for resource protection. And the background screen here is about 300 ravens. I'm going to talk a lot about ravens today because they cause a lot of problems, but I want you to know that we're using the ravens sort of as a guinea pig for developing conservation technology. So what's the trouble with ravens? Well, there are the troubles with ravens. They attack agricultural crops. Lower right, you see ravens in a pistachio orchard. They can take 15 to 40% of the crop. They cause fires on electrical equipment. They get into waste treatment. Any part of the waste treatment cycle, they're there to glean what they can. They upper left, you see a dairy and ravens eating the grain, and lower right is desert tortoises, and that's my particular concern that brought me into it. But ravens are basically ecological vacuums. They go out and they basically eat everything in their environment that they can, particularly during breeding season. And so all of these creatures you see on this slide are victims of raven predation in one way or another. And so they are ecologically very problematic. The desert tortoise is sort of the poster child of raven victims because they leave behind evidence of the crime. This slide shows 135 juvenile tortoises collected from beneath one nest in a place called Kramer Hills in 1988. And in the succeeding 4 years, over the course of 4 years, this single pair of ravens killed 250 juvenile tortoises. The problem is that raven numbers are exploding. I've had this half-century career now, and the density of ravens is just dramatically higher than when I started as a field biologist. So it's not just that ravens cause problems, it's that there are more ravens to cause problems. And where this intersects sort of more directly with human interest is particularly for electric utilities. Ravens love to build nests on utility structures, particularly transformers on distribution poles. There's basically one of these transformers per household, and ravens love to build nests on them. They're great nest platforms. The problem comes when the sticks and often the wire that ravens integrate into their nests form a conductor. Essentially, you get a massive short up on the pole. Quite often the nest catches fire, the pole can catch fire, and the transformer can catch fire. That's not great, but the really ominous implication is for fires sparked by utility equipment in high wildfire risk zones. Here's a whole bunch of scary little facts about fire in California, PG&E had to declare bankruptcy. Southern Cal Edison's paid somewhere on the order of $10 billion in the last decade for wildfire loss liability. Electrical utilities really are very nervous about wildfire ignition sources, and ravens are one of those. Ravens and other birds nesting on their equipment can cause wildfires. So what about the rest of us? I mean, the utilities plainly have self-interested motivation to solve the problem. But let's look at the societal cost is loss of human life and property, the cost of displaced communities, the burden that places on our society. Loss of insurance coverage is one that people ought to be paying a lot of attention to. Then there's air pollution. The negative health effects of that are significant. And then there's a massive release of CO2 from wildfires that really threatens to negate all of our other efforts to reduce CO2 emissions, could be swamped by wildfire if we don't get a handle on it. And finally, loss and degradation of wildlife habitat and open space. So some pretty severe consequences of wildfire, and I'm gonna circle back to wildfire at the end. But I want to talk about what we do as a company, and then show you some examples of some of our gizmos, which are pretty cool. We have aerial drones that squirt oil onto ravens' eggs. We have the aforementioned 3D printed fake baby tortoise that we have weaponized. We call it the Techno Tortoise. All kinds of lasers, and we've got a rover. I just picked a slide of it doing a wheelie because I thought that was cool. But we're using a lot of innovative tech to solve problems. So pistachio growers don't like ravens wiping out their crops. Here you're going to see a drone flight approved by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, by the way. Watch what happens when the drone approaches, and there's about 100 to 150 ravens in that hay barn. And that's how they reacted just to a simple drone flight. So this was experimental. I was trying to learn, what kind of response will we get from these birds from a simple drone flight. It's powerful. Here's the Technotort again, and note the title, surprise, surprise. Here you're going to see the surprises. So the weaponized Technotort is equipped to spray a highly irritating, non-toxic, but highly irritating material in the face of an attacking raven. And you're going to see about 30 seconds of ravens being very surprised to have this, supposed piece of food suddenly squirt a nasty chemical in their face. It's basically pepper spray for ravens. And strangely enough, it's fake grape juice. It's artificial grape flavoring is what's driving those ravens crazy and driving them away. We're basically trying to rewire raven predation behavior with this device. Here we're doing birth control on ravens. This is aerial remote egg oiling with a drone equipped to spray oil on nests in utility structures. And we work with Southern Cal Edison, PG&E, and LADWP to do this work. And what that's doing is rendering those eggs non-viable. However, the adults continue taking care of the eggs. So essentially, we're tying up all of their effort during the breeding season, and they get 0 babies out of the deal. This is a mature technology that is being applied very widely. The really cool news is that it's working. If you look at the right side box with all those negative numbers, that's the decrease in raven sightings. We do point counts to assess the effect of what we're doing. Basically, in 5 of 6 critical habitat units for desert tortoise, we've seen significant decreases in raven numbers. It's rare that you get to look at the data and have it tell you such an encouraging story. So that's great. Now on to lasers. you're going to see, this is a brief clip. This is just going to sort of familiarize you with the reaction of ravens to a single sweep of a green laser. That's about 400 ravens responding to about a 2.5 second sweep of laser light. Very powerful reaction, which is very good for us. So we started experimenting with remotely controlled options of these lasers. Here you're going to see this laser sweep out, and several hundred ravens repelled by that sweep of the laser along that distribution pole line. Here are some examples near a composting facility of ravens being hazed by our lasers, and this is an internet connected laser. So the operator in this case is 20 miles away. The operator could be in Paris or Seoul, South Korea, and have this same effect on these ravens in the Mojave Desert. We think this is evolutionary technology, and I don't have time to get into it, but we're very excited by this potential and by how well this worked in an extensive field deployment over the winter. I'm going to trigger this video and talk about subsidies. This is a sewage treatment plant near Victorville, California, and there are very many. There's about 75 ravens down inside those tanks, which are primary processing tanks for sewage. I won't get into why the ravens are so attracted, but there's a very high value food item down inside those tanks. And this was the very first use of that internet connected laser. And you see, maybe 8 or 10 ravens kind of hopping around and moving around in the area. They're undisturbed at this point. What you're going to see is you won't see the laser, but we shot it for about 3.5 seconds, and you're going to see a quite dramatic reaction on the part of the ravens. And this was exactly what we wanted to see. This was the very first firing of it, and this fired us up. It was like the dramatic response was really encouraging. The point of this, there they go, boom, they don't like lasers, and all of them went away. Subsidies are why we have so many ravens. Human beings make resources available to ravens. Ravens respond by having a lot of babies. It's why we have so many ravens now and so many raven problems. We're on the forefront of solving those problems. Here it is in graphic form, our effect in graphic form. That the green portion of the line is when we were firing lasers, and you see, obviously it suppresses the numbers, and also they don't habituate. You don't see a rebound in raven numbers until we cease firing the lasers. But even in the post-laser period, their numbers never reached what they were pre-laser. So very encouraging results there. And this is with the internet connected laser. So now what? Where do we go from here? We focus on the lasers. We fundraise because we're going to have to scale up considerably. And we do field trials with Southern Cal Edison next year. I can't show you the device we're going to use, but we're going to attack that problem of ravens nesting on transformers. And we did a brief trial of it this spring. 9 of 9 raven nests were abandoned when we put our gizmo up there. We don't work alone. In fact, the thing I'm proudest of about our company is that we collaborate so well and with such a wide variety of people. Hardshell Labs, we're an emerging technology. We like to go for problems that everybody else thinks are insoluble. Our formula is to take all the emerging tech, combine it with our knowledge of animal behavior, and apply that in non-lethal ways. We don't kill anybody. We don't kill anything. We get the job done. We've just launched a thing called Project Hardshell. We have a Patreon page. Love you to visit our website, hardshelllabs.com, and go to our Patreon page and help us out, help us scale up to do this work more widely and more effectively. Ravens don't like us. We are highly amused by what we're doing. The ravens are not. This was a raven that ultimately is wearing a radio and telling us all about raven movements, but they aren't amused, and that amuses us. So thank you very much, and let's do Q&A.
Fantastic, Tim. Thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and stop sharing on that, and I'll introduce real quickly our group for the recording today. My name is Rushton Hurley. I am the programs chair for the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley. And I will also introduce in Houston, Rory, and then in Vancouver, Nick, our current president as well. So, Tim, man, there are plenty of questions to get this going. Nick, I'm going to have you start, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, for presenting and sharing, because I had no idea, and it's fascinating. And I guess my starting question is, I've so many I want to go with, but first for your journey to this, which is you started with field biology and you saw a problem and you're like, I want to solve this problem. Like, is that this simplified version of it? Like,
that is the simple version. Yeah. There was a moment where I had worked an entire season looking for surveying tortoises, and I found nothing but adult tortoises. I and a volunteer were working on this, and she came up to me one day and she said, well, I finally found a baby tortoise. And I brightened, and she said it was in the beak of a raven. She saw this raven flying over with a doomed baby tortoise windmilling its legs. And that horrified me and sort of kicked me out of the classic objective scientist role of like taking notes into I've got to do something. And Hardshell Labs emerged out of that moment, actually.
And I guess tying it into like why ravens have grown so much, like you were saying that it's subsidies, and it's that human impact that they're leveraging all the waste and food that we're producing, and also transformers as good nesting spots. Like, is it? So are we like, when I think of when I've traveled to places like the Northwest Territories in Canada, I've not gotten to Alaska yet, but there's a number of First Nations that obviously revere ravens, but obviously probably also don't want them in those numbers. Is there any conflict you run into with since you're not lethal, you're helping, I assume, the raven in the end?
A couple of things there. I revere ravens too. They're incredible animals. They're so smart. And it's not their fault that the ecosystem is out of balance. What has happened is that humans have made resources widely available, and ravens are smart enough to take full advantage of them. It's on us to reduce the amount of those resources we make available. But in the interim, we're trying to look at how do we deny access so the lasers don't blind the ravens. The egg oiling doesn't hurt the adult ravens. Obviously, it hurts the eggs. But what we did when we started egg oiling, we did a very smart thing. I work with a woman named Mercy Vaughn, who's very sharp, and she said we need to go to every animal rights and wildlife advocacy group we can think of and tell them what we're considering doing. And we did it preemptively. So we went to PETA, we went to Audubon Society, we went to various ornithological societies, and we just told them there is this problem with ravens. Most of them were aware of it, and here's what we're going to do, and we want you to know about it before we start doing it. We got nobody opposed us. There were some that said we're neutral on this, but we're not going to oppose it. And then Audubon Society said we realize this is a problem, and you have to do something about it. So there is the non-lethal aspect is by design. It's like lethal control measures spark controversy and friction. We can't afford that friction. We have a problem to solve. And part of the equation is the sociological one. It is that First Nations revere ravens. It is that people like animals and that they don't want animals killed. So the tricky challenge is, how do you do it without hurting any animals? And the beauty is that emerging technology allows us to do these things. We couldn't have, none of this was possible 15 years ago. It's remarkable to me, the power. I didn't even talk about integrating AI into these systems, which I know AI has a checkered reputation right now, but we're looking at it as an incredible force multiplier. The internet connected laser is going to allow us to do things because we won't have to have a human being on site. It's going to massively increase the applicability of that solution. So I was a Luddite. I mean, for 40 years out in the field, it's like a 35 millimeter camera was about as complicated as I wanted to get. And now I've just, like, because of that moment, hearing about the little baby raven and or tortoise in the raven's beak, now I'm a gizmo head. It's very weird. But, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures, and these are desperate times ecologically, and there's no way to sugarcoat that. And ravens are a huge problem, and a growing problem.
I have one more, Rush, if it's okay, and it's really around the technology. It's actually that I get that did you have to do any research to figure out which laser works? I mean, because like I'm just trying to picture of like, how do you determine that lasers are going to scare a raven? Like, and then of course, to your point of the like evolution of it, I feel like I see people with like these AI things that like take pictures and identify the birds. So I imagine that hopefully it's near commercial viability for you to just adopt something. But like, it sounds cool, but I'm just wondering how someone goes, yeah, let's point lasers at them.
You start with trying one out and seeing it work. And you got to understand, the Luddite in me, my anti-raven technology prior to the laser was rocks. I would see a raven land in tortoise habitat and run after it with a rock and try to chuck a rock at it. I never got close. The ravens always flew away, but that was it. I wasn't going to shoot them. It wasn't legal. And then through a series of connections, I get a laser in my hands, and I see this raven 3/4 of a mile away radically alter its flight path because I'm shining a laser in front of it. And I was just like, wow, it's total serendipity, but ravens are the most laser sensitive species we've encountered. And we've tested 100 different species for their laser sensitivity. And we're working on species specific approaches to laser because they're not all green laser sensitive. We think they're all laser sensitive, but it depends on what particular colors or combinations of colors might they be sensitive to. So we're actively figuring that out, and I'm constantly experimenting to refine our approach.
So clearly the control of the raven population has to be part of how this all works out, and you know what you're doing in terms of spraying the eggs, just as raven birth control, I think you said you called it. But if the transformer towers are so good in that, like, maybe they're better than a tree because there are fewer predators for the ravens or whatever it might be, isn't it a given that we'll need to change something about how the towers work? I mean, it seems to me like that would be a simpler approach than just flying drones there, although I love that we have a way of dealing with the situation as it is.
Well, the solution I teased, the thing we're going to test next spring, is actually to eliminate their willingness to go. We're going to make the top of the transformer so unpleasant that they will choose to establish their nest somewhere else. Now, they will have other choices, but what we're doing in that case is we're taking a specific defined area, we're rendering it unattractive to ravens such that they will nest somewhere else. At the same time, we're going to keep doing all of the other work we're doing. And, I view it as we're trying to haunt the landscape. You saw the techno tortoise and the ravens coming up, and they think they're going to flip this thing over and slice it open and eat a nice piece of tortoise pate. And instead, the thing goes off in their face and sprays pepper spray at them. It's essentially the exploding cigar trick for ravens. And so we want them to be off balance. I'm gonna describe a moment I had the other day. I was working at a dairy and I was figuring to go in with my laser and hit them up. And all I had to do, they know my car, they know me. I'm known by thousands of ravens and they don't like me. And they know my car. And all it took was me driving around and stopping my car. That told them, uh-oh, it's him, and he stopped his car. Something bad could happen. And 90% of the ravens on that dairy went away because I stopped my car 3 times. So it's so exciting because we're burrowing into their social network and into their brains, and we're rewiring their decision making and the cost benefit analysis in their head. We're fiddling around with that. It's super interesting and really exciting, and we're getting somewhere. We're really starting to get strong signals that we're on the right path.
Well, so I'm imagining that there's a segment of the viewership that now sees what you've built as a way of keeping birds from actually relieving themselves on their cars. But I guess
funny you should say that.
Yeah.
I'm up in Alaska, and man, we're everywhere, aren't we? A fisherman friend of mine came up to me. He says, you're working on that laser thing. You got anything? Because I go away in the winter and I come back and the ravens have roosted in my carport and there's a 1/4 inch of poop on the windshield. And is there a way to keep them away? And I'm actually going to go over to his house, and yes, we have tools for him. You're not far off. You're not far off. Just bird poop, like at the sewage treatment plant. They spend $35,000 a year cleaning up after birds. They would love to have us come in and just like keep the birds away, so their work environment is more pleasant and they don't have to do all this cleanup. And you go there, and amongst those primary filtration areas, and the concrete walkways between them are just littered with feces. It's not great. So there are humble problems and there are dramatic problems. Birds pooping around is a humble problem, but birds sparking massive wildfires, that's a significant problem. And the same set of tools can solve all of it.
All right. So I love the creativity that you're bringing to addressing these. And it's fun to be able to share the stories of how, a certain amount of innovation and even compassion and willingness to work with all sorts of different companies and organizations to make it a viable approach to dealing with the problem. That's very exciting. I'll hand it back to you in just a minute for the final word. But for all of you who are watching this recording, if you are visiting Rotarian, we hope you will do a couple of things for us. Matter of fact, if you are a visitor, period, we hope you will do a couple of things for us. One is that if you're on our page, a little farther down is the attendance form. That just kind of tells us, how much reach that we're getting. And so that's helpful to us. We won't share that info with anybody. So please let us know you're here. And then at the very bottom, you'll see our Discuss forum, DISQUS. And that is a place where you can give thoughts about what you learned in this program or any other element of the meeting. We hope that the inspirational quality of what we have in our meetings is such that you'll keep coming back. And for those of you who may never have considered joining a service organization, every week you're getting a little dose of inspiration is not a bad way to do it. Just saying. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to Tim for the final word. Tim, what would you like for people to have in mind as they finish the recording?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by our ecological situation as a species, and it's easy to get depressed and want to give up. The central lesson I have learned is 2 things. Talk to people who are outside your field. So this comes about because we talked to engineers, and engineers said, oh yeah, we've got tools, and they love to work with us. And the second one is because of the evolution and development of technology, more things are possible. It's possible to do more things. It's our responsibility to use those tools as effectively as possible without making the problems any worse. That's what Hardshell's about. That's what we're trying to do. Go to our website and check us out. We're working on some pretty cool stuff.
Fantastic. Everyone, we will see you next week.